All right, so yesterday we got an unprecedented leaked draft document from the Supreme Court, essentially indicating that they are going to be, in the next couple of months, officially overturning Roe v. Wade and allowing for conservative states around the country to begin criminalizing abortion. So, here from Politico, who was the outlet that obtained this leaked document, I wanted to read you guys some of the details and then I'll give you guys my opinion on this. But they say Supreme Court has voted to overturn abortion rights, the draft opinion shows. So a little bit of details here. They say the Supreme Court has voted to strike down the landmark Roe v. Wade decision, according to an initial draft majority opinion written by Justice Samuel Alito, who was appointed under the Bush administration and circulated inside the court and obtained by Politico. And they say the draft opinion is a full-throated, unflinching repudiation of the 1973 decision, which guaranteed federal constitutional protections of abortion rights, and a subsequent 1992 decision, Planned Parenthood versus Casey, that largely maintained the right. And he said, quote, Roe was egregiously wrong from the start. So first off, just looking at these two cases initially, they are essentially a super precedent. So this is what was a main question in the Supreme Court hearings for justices like Brett Kavanaugh and Amy Coney Barrett, where you had even some Democrats like Susan Collins who were insisting that no, Brett Kavanaugh, he would never vote to overturn Roe v. Wade. He's a firm believer in constitutional precedent and he has a respect for that. Now, obviously, that was massively delusional, and it looks like that they have absolutely no problem whatsoever with overturning huge super precedents like abortion rights in this country. So two different decisions there that were made, and they're basically saying we want to undo all of it. So they continue with another quote saying, we hold that Roe and Casey must be overruled. He writes in the document labeled as the opinion of the court, it is time to heed the Constitution and return the issue of abortion to the people's elected representatives. So again, opening the door for conservative states all around the country to start beginning or continuing in this process of criminalizing abortion. And they say deliberations on controversial cases have in the past been fluid. Justices can and sometimes do change their votes as draft opinions circulate, and major decisions can be subject to multiple drafts and vote trading, sometimes until just days before the decision is unveiled. And the court's holding will not be final until it is published, likely in the next 2 months. So honestly, this is maybe a little bit hopeful to think of it from this perspective. It really does not seem like there is going to be any meaningful vote change here. It seems like at the end of the day, it's probably going to be made along 5-4 lines between the evangelical reactionary conservatives on the court and the rest of the court. So they continue here saying, the immediate impact of the ruling as drafted in February would be to end a half-century guarantee of federal constitutional protection of abortion rights and allow each state to decide whether to restrict or ban abortion. And we've seen all of these different laws that have been coming out in states like Texas and Mississippi, etc., where they are doing these completely arbitrary bans on like 6-week abortions or 15-week abortions, most of which are before many women are even aware that they're pregnant in the first place. So again, intentionally trying to set the standard of outright criminalizing abortions in pretty much all cases. And they say it's unclear if there have been subsequent changes to the draft, but no draft decision in the modern history of the court has been disclosed publicly while a case is still pending. So the leaking of this document is kind of a big deal in the sense that it's unprecedented, but really, how is that anything that's controversial? It shouldn't be. This is a type of shit that the American people deserve to have a glimpse into. Why should we have a Supreme Court of completely unelected bureaucrats or lawyers who are getting to make these massive countrywide and nationwide changing decisions without the opinions of the American people being taken into account? Now, conservatives will turn around and they'll say, no, the Supreme Court is politically neutral and they're just reading the Constitution as it is. That's entirely bullshit. All of these reactionary conservatives that were appointed under Donald Trump or under George W. Bush, they were put there for political reasons, and for many of them, they were put there explicitly for a decision like this relating to abortion rights. But they say the unprecedented revelation is bound to intensify the debate over what was already the most controversial case on the docket this term, and the draft opinion offers an extraordinary window into the justices' deliberations in one of the most consequential cases before the court in the last 5 decades. And some court watchers predicted that the conservative majority would slice away at abortion rights without flatly overturning a 49-year-old precedent, but the draft shows that the court is looking to outright reject Roe's logic and legal protections. So again, they're not doing doing this chip away strategy, as they were just indicating there. They're just outright trying to completely open the door for criminalizing abortion in conservative states. And I think that this quote here at the end really just sums up this ridiculous conservative opinion on this issue. Here from Samuel Alito, he wrote, "The inescapable conclusion is that a right to abortion is not deeply rooted in the nation's history and traditions." Well, listen, I mean, if you're going to make an appeal to history and traditions, what are you actually appealing to? I mean, you're appealing to the original drafting of the Constitution by founding fathers. Most of them, a literal outright majority of them, owned slaves. I mean, do you really want to open the door for only making appeals to our nation's history and traditions? I mean, that would just be a completely arbitrary precedent that would take us back to some of the worst periods in American history. But this is basically what their argument is centering around. Now we get to my opinions on this. So first off, you can make multiple different arguments, and obviously this is going to be a huge flashpoint issue in the political realm and otherwise that we're going to have to keep talking about for months and months and months on end. But even if you just accept, here's my problem with this debate, is that you can make the arguments along freedom grounds, right? And you know, how a woman should have the right to have full control over her bodily autonomy. And I think those are very fair and accurate points to be made. But at the end of the day, even if you accept, and here's where it gets completely ridiculous to me, is that even if you accept the conservative logic of being anti-abortion and wanting in an ideal world to lower the amount of abortions that are taking place overall, well, banning it and making it illegal and criminalizing it isn't an effective strategy in reducing the overall rate of abortions. Now, according here to Amnesty International, they say criminalizing abortion does not stop abortion, it just makes them less safe. So they say preventing women and girls from accessing an abortion does not mean they stop needing one. That's why attempts to ban or restrict abortions do nothing to reduce the number of abortions. It only forces people to seek out unsafe abortions. And they estimate that 25 million unsafe abortions take place each year, the vast majority of them in developing countries, but obviously going to be many more of them taking place here in the United States if this is followed through on. And they say, in contrast to legal abortion that is carried out by a trained medical provider, unsafe abortions can have fatal consequences, so much so that unsafe abortions are the third leading cause of maternal deaths worldwide and lead to an additional 5 million largely preventable disabilities, according to the World Health Organization. So listen, again, even if you accept the delusional framework or the logic of conservatives on this issue of abortion, if you want to lower the amount of abortions, this is not an effective way to go about doing that. If you actually wanted to do that in an effective way, things that you could do would be like providing universal health care in this country, providing universal access to contraceptives, providing, you know, an improvement to the material economic conditions of working class Americans so that they don't feel like they are not in the economic position to be able to look after a child. Their, you know, sexual education. There are so many different things that you could do that would be much more effective in actually reducing the amount of abortions taking place than criminalizing it. And so that's why it's so ridiculous, even just at face value, because you see the contradiction. If they actually wanted to lower the amount of abortions, they would do things like the things that I was just describing there. But of course, those are some of the biggest issues that conservatives are opposing. They don't believe in universal access to contraceptives. They don't believe in universal access to healthcare or improving sexual education. If anything, they believe in like abstinence only sexual education. They don't believe in any of those things that would actually be effective at achieving the goal that they claim that this is for. So the conclusion to that is that conservatives obviously don't actually care about lowering the amount of abortions. If they did, they would go about it in a completely different way. What this is really about is just restricting women's access to have bodily autonomy and control what happens to their own bodies. It's just about control and a political W for their reactionary base. That's what this is about. But there are other different angles that I think are important to note on this, namely the popularity of this in the country or the unpopularity of this type of decision. So here from Morning Consult, they did some recent polling, and really, I mean, if you look at this, if you look at the all voter breakdown who support legal in all cases or legal in most cases for abortion, it's roughly around 52% in this specific poll. I've seen it go all the way up to like 65 to even 70%, depending on how you word it. But in this poll, they show 52% support for legal in most cases or legal in all cases, 12% don't know. And basically the precedent that this is opening the door for, making it illegal in pretty much all cases, is the least popular option over here at 12%. So even among like Republicans, for example, you have a higher percentage of Republicans who support making abortion legal in most cases or in all cases, roughly 30%, than you have total voters who believe in the precedent that is currently being laid out by the Supreme Court. So it's literally the most unpopular, specific decision that could possibly be made on the issue of abortion rights, which again is another argument that you hear from conservatives where they talk about the apolitical nature of the Supreme Court and how they're just reading into the Constitution and they shouldn't take American public opinion into account when they're making these decisions. No, of course they're political. Of course they were put in place to make massively unpopular political decisions like overturning Roe v. Wade. And so, of course, they should be subject to critiquing from the American people. That's how a functioning democracy should work. They should feel the pressure from the American people in making a decision like this. So it's just completely ridiculous to imply otherwise. Now, we get to the most important part of this, which is what exactly could Democrats do right now to prevent this from happening? Well, they have a very straightforward route in order to make this precedent not able to be set by the Supreme Court. So, as pointed out here by Nico Bowie, he says 50 senators could preempt this decision tomorrow by ending the filibuster and enacting the Women's Health Protection Act. So, listen, Democrats are coming out right now, and again, probably going to have to make multiple different videos on this because there's been a huge liberal freakout, basically blaming leftists for not supporting Hillary Clinton, etc., and blaming voters for this outcome here. But at the end of the day, Democrats currently control right now the White House, the Senate, and the House of Representatives, and they could take steps right now to enshrine abortion rights into federal law. They could do that tomorrow, as pointed out here. So all you would have to do is end the filibuster, put pressure on your conservative members like Joe Manchin and Kirsten Sinema, who are opposed to ending the filibuster, put pressure on this, and fucking make it happen, and then pass this into law. That's what you would do if you actually cared about protecting abortion rights. But Democrats seem to be more prioritizing basically the amount that they can fundraise off of this threat to abortion rights, and profiting off of this in the sense of, you know, their political aspirations in the 2022 midterms, which it seems like this is completely changing the makeup of what the 2022 midterms are going to actually, look at. If this was a bailout, then, or this is essentially a lucky bailout for Democrats in a political sense, because they were, currently on track to get absolutely slaughtered in the 2022 midterms. And so having this massive issue come up, it's obviously very contentious. It's obviously very unpopular. So this could be something that bails out Democrats in the midterms. But at the end of the day, I mean, even if you elect more Democrats to the House, even if you elect more senators to the Senate, then how is this dynamic going to change? I mean, you can say, they're barely on the margin here with only 50 Democratic senators, but what if you had 55? I mean, what if you had 58 senators, and that's really not even realistically going to happen in 2022. So let's say in a dream world scenario, Democrats end up with 54 senators or 55 senators if they get wildly lucky during this election cycle. Well, how is that going to change? You're still going to have Democratic senators who are conservative on this issue, who are going to form a bloc and try to oppose this thing. So at the end of the day, it's going to require a fight within your own party to get people to fall in line. So why the fuck would you not just go do that right now? But here's what Joe Biden's response was to this draft that came out, and I think really the last paragraph here is the most important one, because he basically says, I'm, as the president, not really going to do much to try to push this in the right direction. He says, if the court does overturn Roe, it will fall on our nation's elected officials at all levels of government to protect a woman's right to choose. That's true. And it will fall on voters to elect pro-choice officials this November. And at the federal level, we will need more pro-choice senators and pro-choice majority in the House to adopt legislation that codifies Roe, which I will work to pass and sign into law. So again, if that's your only strategy is just elect more Democrats, well, you had a supermajority under Obama. You have a majority in the House, in the Senate, including Kamala Harris's tie-breaking vote, and you own the White House. So how is that dynamic necessarily going to change if you just, on the margins, get a couple more Democrats seated in the House? I'm not going to say that it wouldn't make any difference, but it seems like at the end of the day, you're going to need to take on this fight within your own party. And so if you're just looking back and counting on voters to bail you out, or if you're just looking back and passively observing the political situation within Congress right now, then you're not really fighting for it. I mean, you're just coming out here and tacitly giving your support for abortion rights while doing absolutely nothing of substance to make that happen. Now, again, this is basically coming at a time where if Republicans do manage to take the House or the Senate or both in 2022, then this is what they're going to be doing. So here from the Washington Post, they say the next frontier for anti-abortion movement, a nationwide ban. So you have the opportunity right now, with control of all of the chambers of our government, you have the opportunity right now to enshrine this at the federal level into law and motivate people to actually go and vote for you. And if you don't do that, well, Republicans are going to do the alternative. They are going to try to impose a nationwide ban on abortions at the federal level. So, at the end of the day, the lesson remains the same. Democrats are in power right now. They do have the power to get rid of the filibuster, to enshrine the, the Women's Health Protection Act into law. They have the ability to do that right now. So that's where the primary amount of pressure should be. It shouldn't be on, sending out fundraising texts and emails, which I've already been getting from the Democratic Party. It shouldn't be on trying to make this a wedge political issue to be advantageous for your party. You should be fighting to do this right now, enshrine it into law, codify Roe, and, actually fight for the American people on an issue that you've been weaponizing for basically decades now as a splinter issue to motivate people to show up and vote for you and give you money in these elections. Actually go and prove that you are willing to fight for this.